welcome to another Humpday Q&A. Let's dive straight in so we can get to all these lovely questions that everyone's stacking up. So
that's right.
Let's go for the do's and don'ts. Scott, do's and don'ts.
Be a decent human being. Done.
Right.
Be nice, be respectful, be constructive. This is YouTube. I understand that's a little higher than YouTube's normal standards, but at least we're not Reddit. Don't post anything that's adult, rude, offensive. Come on, people. This is common sense. Don't advertise or promote your service. Don't go screaming every 5 minutes that you need a job in all caps. A big one that people still seem to do, pay attention. Yes, this means you. Don't keep asking your same question repeatedly. What you don't see is we have a system where we star a question. It puts it in a list. If you ask the same question again, we're going to star the new one and unstar the old one, which puts you back at the bottom of the list. If we get to your question at all depends on if you keep putting it back at the bottom over and over again. So if you keep asking the question, it's going to do the opposite of what you want.
They get it.
Harassment.
Right.
Moving on. Yeah. Well, hey, that's the big one that people actually do.
Right. And yeah, any harassment, you're going to get blocked from here and other places. Let's go on. My name's Simon. I'm Flutter community leader, DJ Dev Angels London. You can follow me on Twitter at Dev Angels London. Scott.
My name is Scott Stahl. I am a community leader, co-organizer, GDG Cleveland. I do speaking on Flutter, and rumor is I write some code here and there at Dev Angels.
And I'm Randall Schwartz, and I'm a Dart and Flutter Google developer expert, and I often run the questions behind the scenes, and I'm doing that again today, but I'll also be helping answer some of your questions. So we're all here to give you the best possible answers or the answers we come up with, whichever comes first.
I'm doing the very American thing. It is noon. I'm still in a ball cap, bedroom slippers, and coffee.
Yes.
And this is American coffee. It's got the good stuff in the bottom.
Let's get to questions. We've already got 4 in the queue. Let's do it.
By the way, folks, I personally have a very hard stop at the top of the hour. So I don't know about these guys, but let's get moving.
Last week we ran over, and I've got to head off as well for the Flutter. So every Wednesday I'm now doing a Flutter Dev Camp London.
So okay, now how to push the button. So when these guys leave, I'm stuck. So we're closing the show when these guys leave.
Yeah, we may have to cut it at an hour. Actually, for real, we've been saying we're going to do that for years. All right. Yeah. With the number of state management frameworks available for Flutter, what is your take on how developers can keep up, stay relevant for job opportunities? Personally, don't try all of them. I mean, I'm saying, don't try to master all of them. You can try all of them a little if you want, but pick 2. And when I say pick 2, that I'm saying learn to do state management through vanilla, which is like find ancestor state of type thing, just using the framework, and then Bloc, or learn Bloc and RiverPod, or learn provider and vanilla, or basically Bloc, provider, RiverPod, and vanilla. Maybe
the point here is to learn all the principles, right? Like you learn one of these, and they all have overlap, right? They're all doing state management, right? So and the other side of this is, like, in general, in programming, you have to use a lot of your time just keeping up to date with new things, like learning new techniques, doing new things. A percentage of your time is always learning because it changes all the time. And also, as you know, the API, the actual API itself, Flutter API, has been evolving all the time. You have to keep up to date with that. So, you know, there's actually a Flutter merge bot on Twitter, which that will tell you when things get merged into the master branch or a branch. I can't remember. But that might be helpful in terms of keeping up to date. But they do announcements, and on each release, there's release notes on the website, which you can view. But yeah, generally you need to, if you've got if there's a job, you say relevant for job opportunities specifically, I'd say look at the job references at the moment, go around and see, they're all talking about Bloc. I should go learn Bloc, right? Use that as your go-to, and once you
Bloc and provider are going to be pretty safe. They're going to give you a wide swath. And the other thing too is if they ask you about something that you don't know, something Simon told me a long time ago, I've found is very impressive in job interviews. You look them straight in the face and you say, I don't know that one, just like I don't know a whole lot of other things here and there. That's why when I code, I have the docs open.
Key thing to understand about state
management. Oh my God,
management.
you read documentation.
So the key thing to understand about state management is you can't just have global data sitting somewhere. You have to have a way of knowing to rebuild your widget when that global data changes or that shared data changes. And every one of these systems does that at some fundamental level, because getting notified about something changing is fundamental to a reactive framework, which Flutter is.
Yes. And the vast majority of them do it with good coding practices. There are rare exceptions, but the vast majority of them are just fine.
We'll try not to mention the swear word today.
Moving on.
Yes, move.
Justine, I'm going to say
this one's a little confused. I'm confused.
Hang on. What dependency injection solution is mostly preferred when working with Bloc packages? So here's the first thing. None. There you go.
Yeah, well, I'm looking at this. I don't do much with Bloc personally. Felix, please don't take that personally. You do a great package. But isn't Bloc a dependency injection solution in itself?
Well, you can use blocks. You have here's the thing, right? Dependency injection is the term given for giving the dependencies of your object is requiring the dependency of your object to be given to you in your constructor. That's basically dependency injection. So that's all it is. So that's all you need to do. You just put some final variables with whatever you need in your class and then pass them in the constructor. Now, to construct this object, you need to have instances of those objects. Ta-da!
Now, by that definition, if dependency injection is sort of passing a constructor in as a parameter because you're injecting it, an entire Flutter app is nothing but one massive case of dependency injection.
Yeah, I mean that's essentially you're not wrong. The term dependency injection is just for the pattern of any dependencies I have, they're injected. Now, there is injection in terms of code generation, and that is it generates the code that does that. So you inside your class, you can say I want to subscribe or I want this instance of this object, and then it will in the constructor go and get those from a factory or provider or something of this, and that's and in that kind of solution where I'd go with that would be to use get_it by get_it package by Thomas Burkhart, and that's where I would go with that.
Mm-hmm.
And there's examples of get_it working with Bloc. So get_it is the package.
Yeah.
And that's actually a service locator. But
yeah, I mean, it has a service locator model, but it's the same thing. You can override them. It actually does dependency injection now as a thing. Anyway, the other thing is you can actually just briefly talk about dependency injection. Just to want to solve a problem that most people get with dependency injection. That is when you have circular dependencies, right? You have objects that depend on each other, and therefore you cannot construct one without the other. And in this situation, you create what's called a lazy provider, right? Which is simply you're passing in a function that returns the object that you need. And then the first time you can make a late final variable, and the first time it gets called, it stores the result of that function. And this way, it does exactly the same thing as what you would do normally, but it ejects when you first access the member variable rather than at the constructor time.
I'm just having this silly picture in my head that you do late on both of them, and then it's like two people stuck at a door and they're both courteous. It's like, you first. No, you first. No, you first.
Well, it is kind of like that, but once a late variable has been initialized, it returns the value and doesn't call the method. So this is the trick. So as long as it's late final, right? Because once it's been set, it can't be reset, so it doesn't call the function, and late means it doesn't initialize it up front. So there's a little trick for you. Anyway, Besher, how can the app listen to volume press even if the screen is locked? So on iOS, you can't do that. On Android, you can get the media events, but I think you have to be registered as a media session provider. It's just not something that you're supposed to be able to do. There used to be a way of doing this in like version 1 of Android, if you remember rightly. There's a global go look up. So they're called intents, and this is what Android transmits out to the system to do something. Think of them like actions to be performed, and it sends out media button pressed, like up, down. I think there is for volume or volume changed. I think there's some intents that are fired for that, but they may have been deprecated by now. A lot of the global intent stuff was, so I don't know if that's the case. There is a way of doing this with a foreground service, but again, this is all Android specifics, right? Like go look, if you're looking for Flutter, that's your problem. Don't Google Flutter, Google Android, foreground service, Android, listen for volume button presses and see how you do it with Android. And then you have to learn how to do it in Kotlin. But once you know how to do that, you can then launch that from your Flutter app, right? And that's
a lot of the questions that we're seeing, folks. Please try to think it through. Okay, Flutter is a UI toolkit that sits on top of the operating system. If you're asking any questions about anything that have to do with the hardware, with the camera, with the GPS, with the volume buttons, anything like that, those are handled by the operating system, not by the UI toolkit, which means any answer that you might be able to get is going to have to do with the underlying platform and platform channels. Now, in this case, as Simon said, on iOS, it's not even possible. Fine. But we get a lot of questions of how do you do X in Flutter? And it's like not something Flutter's supposed to be doing. So, all right, moving on.
And just before we jump off the topic, if you go flutter.dev, docs, I didn't think we did this last week. You got packages, platform integration, writing platform specific code is the bit you want, and there's a whole section on Android in here, which is what you want to look at. This bit about platform specific code and how it works in Android, and then further on packages and plugins, developing packages and plugins, and that's the other section of the docs, which will, if it loads, there we go, which provides you the information you need. Basically, you can actually do Flutter create -- template equals plugin, not package, and then you'll get like a default sort of like dark project that works on Android and iOS and has platform channels, method channels, and it all works. So yeah, it's a good starting point.
Very cool. We were kind of joking around about this earlier, but it is kind of true today. The cutoff point for questions is going to be determined by algorithm. When the amount of minutes left in the stream is double the number of questions, the questions are going to get cut. So right now we have 45 minutes. That means we can have 22 and a half questions, and we are up to 9. So
let's go.
Move it.
What are the three main features / concepts you suggest every developer should know professionally?
Navigating the documentation and the code.
There is, I was going to say debugging. Debugging is like using a debugger, breakpoints. That is a big one. That's a big concept. But you talk about main features and concepts. Is that, I mean, the thing is that like concepts as in code concepts, or concepts in features as in how to do stuff when you're programming, right? So, because when you're talking about a Flutter app, I don't think there's any React. I think the best thing I can suggest when it comes to like learning Flutter specifically, and that is like a reactive UI, is to build something that's a reactive UI. Build something that needs to respond to the data changes and have the data changes propagate back to the UI. Work on that. This is what the real reason why we have so many state management solutions is each developer wants to understand state management, so they build their own, right? And it just so happens they go, I built it now, so I'm going to publish it. It's up to you if you want to use someone else's state management. But the point here is that's the principle of what a lot of people go through. So that's when we have a lot of state management solutions. So follow the path, right? Build your own state management solution. You don't have to publish it. You don't have to put it on pub.net, please. But what you can do is you will learn so much about that the way the system works, the way Flutter does that, dependent widgets, all this kind of stuff. it will make sense then, I think.
And two things that I wish I had done sooner. One is when you're creating a fun app for learning, don't just do the part you want. If you're working on trying to do cool looking UI, right, and you build an app, so let's say you do a to-do app, it's been done a gazillion times, but yeah, tech lead, there are a gazillion to-do apps out there. But anyway, don't just stop at the UI because you accomplished what you wanted. Force yourself to solve the problems on the back end too, because you'll learn that and eventually you're going to need it on a real app. And the other thing is, I'm not kidding when I say navigating the code, because you control click. The main time you do this is you look at something you're not familiar with and you say, what do I need to pass into this to make it work? What does this take? That is the biggest question. What does this thing take? And you learn that by control clicking and looking at its constructor and reading its documentation. The documentation will help to a point, but understanding what those parameters are that are being passed in and even control clicking them to dig into them and see what they are, that's massive. And in order to do that, if you're getting confused when you see the type brackets, whether it's type string or type T, E, S, learn your generics. Okay. So mainly if you learn generics and you really understand generics, you'll be able to read those better. And then you'll be able to figure things out by control clicking through the code. Sorry, Randall?
Yes. Now, and just to expand on what Scott was saying, I've seen so many people build, I have an Uber app. Right. And all you've done is duplicate the UI. Think about what has to be on the back end to have a driver and a rider rendezvous. Work through those issues. Actually build something that simulates both the driver and the rider app. Don't just tell me you've got an Uber app. Come on, guys.
Yeah.
Oh, and speaking of issues, how to search the issues when you have a problem. That's probably number 3. And if you notice, none of these are Flutter specific.
No.
But they are the biggest things that will help you.
Right, moving on. Next question. Go on, Scott.
Tips for getting good at UI design. Responsiveness, responsiveness, and responsiveness. And never, 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 never override the user's text scaling. I don't care what you think it should look like.
Design, right? I would recommend one website. This is personally, I've been to this website. I look at it sometimes. Uplabs.com. It's basically, you can see the number 1 place for design files, but basic designers, illustrators, all sorts of people. Like, let's just give me a Uber app. There you go. I don't know. See what comes up. There you go. Uber app redesign challenge, redesign. So you can actually, people have done redesigns of the Uber app to better have the Uber functionality and whatever else. Then you can try and implement these yourself in Flutter, right? How you do this kind of layout. How do I do this kind of effect when the menu comes out and this slides over? You can like learn those things yourself, right? But yeah, look, there's tons. And the thing is, once you start using designs and looking at designs and working with designs, then you're going to fundamentally get better at design, right? Because you understand it better. You go, oh, that makes sense because of this, this, and this, right? Like it all kind of clicks in place. And when it comes to you designing your own app, you'll have some knowledge to back your ideas onto, right? Rather than just plop things on the screen and hope it's okay, right?
And there's also, what is it, Binance or something? Behance and Dribble. Yeah. Behance, that's it. And Dribble.
Behance, yeah.
They're there. But the other thing too is never, never, never set the sizes of things in your widget unless you're pretty much putting a fitted box around it, because then that has to add some structure. You let the parent determine the size of something. So if you're creating a custom button, whatnot, if you're creating, I don't know, a picture frame for an icon, don't give it sizes unless those sizes are within a fitted box. because you want the parent to determine the size.
Yeah, very rarely do you need to specify an actual size. For a give example, let's say you've got 2 panels on the screen. You've got a master detail. That's like a column, and then like 1/3, 2/3 split. Let's say in landscape. Well, that is going to be 1/3 the screen. Now you can calculate that and specify that. That makes sense, right? But for everything inside that, I should be specifying the same 1/3 width for everything inside that because they will size to their parent. So the constraints get passed down. So yes, you will. There'll be times when you want to put those constraints in there. But again, if I was to hard code that width in now that first column, when it shows on mobile, it would be horrible, right? So again, it's whenever you have any sort of fixed constraints, that's when you want to put. That's when you want to think about what this is going to be like on different screen sizes and dimensions and so on. And then you can say, oh, if my minimum screen width is 720, 600, whatever it is, then okay, now use 1 column. If it's greater than that, then use the 2 column thing. Now you've got a responsive layout and design, and it works on tablet and phone. Simple.
Yep. There's a follow-up here. Actually, it doesn't. Sorry, let me jump this in first.
Good.
What if we have a portion of the design which has large text already, like a clock? You are definitely not going to override that. The reason the text scaling is there is because of accessibility. If I have an eyesight problem and I say I want to increase the text scale by 150% and you override that, now I can't see what's on your app.
Be clear.
So how would we handle this? There's
a difference here between font size and text scaling, right? Yeah. Text scaling is provided by the platform, and that's a multiplier that it applies to your font size so that it can be larger for not well-sighted people, right? Whereas, font size, obviously the font size is going to be large because you expect it to be large text, right? Yeah. That's not the point. The point here is you don't fiddle around the scaling because then you just break your accessibility in your app. And it's very frustrating for people that need that accessibility to actually see and use your app. Basically.
Now, if you really need to show that whole clock face, you would probably have it in something that's going to scale the size of it to fit on the screen, but that you're still not messing around with the user's text scaling. That's a bad idea.
So, for example, in the case of, let's say you had an analog clock and you had like the numbers going around and handles or something, then you would make a size box, let's say of a square, give it a dimension, let's say 640 by 640. The number doesn't matter as long as it's square. Then you position everything related to 640 by 640 on your clock face, and then you wrap the whole thing in a fitted box and it'll scale all those numbers based on how big that scale is to fit in the client. And so you don't have to deal. That makes it. Even though you've specified those sizes, everything's responsive. And that's what Scott was talking about, fixed fitted boxes.
Right. And what's basically going to happen with the fitted box is if you specify the size of something as 100 and then you wrap it in a fitted box, if the fitted box is able to be its intrinsic size, if there's 100 available, it'll make it 100. If it scales down to 50, well, then that's 50% of the original. So it will scale everything in there, the sizes you gave it, by 50%. And
same for going up.
It also goes the other way. It can grow too.
Yeah, well, you can prevent it from going up by adding some sizes.
Yeah.
And sometimes you don't want it to go up because you don't want text that's 4 feet high.
There's like 11 things in the enum. Go look it up. Fitted box, boxfit.enum or whatever.
Yeah.
Are there any pros convert dynamic JSON values to their respective data types?
Is there any pros? Is there any pros convert dynamic? I'm not sure. I find is there any pros?
I think that might be pro tips because it's not pros and cons. Pros and cons doesn't fit there. So I'm thinking about
maybe is there any pros to converting your dynamic type to the respective data types? I always do that.
Yeah. I think Roberto's beyond that. I think he knows that.
I think maybe Roberto, if you could just repost your question, I'd like to answer that in more details. So if you repost it, we'll answer that. Let's move on. What's your take on using clean architecture for professional projects?
Yes. Do it. Yes. Do it.
I mean, like he says clean architecture with capitals. This is like I'll give it. Let me just. There's a book called Clean Code, right? Which has a lot of principles in it. Like make sure every function name is well spread out. And literally, if I did that, every one of my functions names would be a whole sentence, right? And to combine them just wouldn't make sense. No, just trust me when I say this. Like if you follow clean code precisely, it kind of directs you down the avenue. So you can follow. The idea is of clean architecture is just Make sure you've got a good architecture and it's clean and you're doing it consistently throughout. I mean, that's like,
yeah, but I mean,
yes.
And what Simon's mentioning though is there are a lot of people who sometimes take this too far, and they'll try to say, oh, there should be no comments because your code should be self-explanatory. No. Okay. And then the other one, I have seen people with Unity gaming say in their C# that there should be one comment per line. No. Basically, one comment per section, probably no more than 3 sentences that tell you what the section's doing.
There's not. I wouldn't say there's a hard and fast rule to this, because I'll give an example. Sorry, Randall, just 1 second. I'll give an example. Let's say I'm doing an algorithm and it's very complex mathematical code. I'm going to explain every bloody line. I'm going to break down all the evaluations of blocks down and explain the hell out of it, because it's really complicated. So it needs more explanation. I think that's the key. The more complicated it is, the more you should be commenting it.
Right, but you could do a 1-sentence comment for 15 or 20 lines of code.
Randall, come on. What?
Randall, yes.
I swear, you guys talk without taking a breath. It's continuous out of both of you guys' mouth. I just want to say, I'm interjecting here. I'm just saying that Andrea is doing a great new series on clean architecture, especially specifically with RiverPod. So it's really great for me and to share with people. So Andrea Bizzotto, that's his last name.
Yeah, Andre
he does a ton of great stuff.
And
basically
new.
Don't take it too far.
Days.
When you're naming a function, don't do what Simon said, which is making a long sentence. Just make it like calculate price.
Yep.
Figure out tax.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on your context and everything else. So there's no hard and fast thing. Like, for example, let's say the entire class was to calculate something. I couldn't call every function calculate that. I mean, like, you'd be prescribed into, and half the problem with programming is just naming stuff and finding synonyms and things that make sense for what you're doing, and because it has to be legible at the end of the day. Right, moving on. Techist, welcome back. Right, Work Manager plugin support in iOS. Headless task not work in iOS. I need to run every 15-minute background task without open app. Which package are you using? So is that the Work Manager package? The problem here is just that is just the nature of iOS, right? Like, iOS itself is very much against background anything, and even Android has gone the way of you can't just run anything in the background, right? You need to have a foreground task. You need to have it worked. Can you mute your mic for a second, Scott?
Yeah, sorry.
I think there is a Work Manager package, which is the Flutter community one. It should run every 15 minutes. I don't think there is any specific. I don't think there's like. You can register periodic tasks. I didn't think that. I think
15 is like the quickest it can run, from what I remember.
iOS supports one-off tasks. Well, there you go. So if you do a one-off task, once you receive that task, do another one-off task in 15 minutes. Problem solved.
Yeah.
I mean, the problem here is it's like and all those kind of things, you need to be able to stop it, right? So you need to make sure that you put a cancellation in there and other things.
You might want to share your screen so people can see what you're looking at here. Randall and I can see that you're doing something, but
no, I mean, I was just looking at the work manager package here, but yeah, the you got register one-off task, and then inside that task you could say register another one-off task, and you kind of got a periodic task thing. But to be honest, it says here, look, background task scheduler documentation. Oh, that is another thing. You do need to have the what they called in entitlement. You need the background. There's 3 different background entitlements. If I remember rightly, you need to make sure you monitor those. But yeah, just again, you're going to the realm here of like of doing stuff with iOS, specific to iOS. So the answer to that is read iOS documentation. Right? What does that say? Sorry to say, I mean, it's not much of an answer. But.
We have 28 minutes and 13 questions. We can fit one more.
Forms inside list view, not builder. Forms inside list view not built seems not validate widgets that are not visible. Any reason?
Yeah, because they're not built.
Hang on a minute. List view not builder, but so you're just talking about list view with children. Seems not validate widgets that are not visible.
That are not visible because it's destroying them if they're more than one or two off of the view.
That's well, yeah, that's just the way slivers works.
Right. So how can it validate something that's not being built?
Like I'll tell you what, if you're trying to get around this problem, use single child scroll view. There you go, with a column in it, with all your items in a column. There you go, problem solved. They're all going to get built.
Problem solved, but is that going to? Here's the problem, Roberto. Is that going to cause another problem depending on how many children you have? Don't do this for Twitter. You obviously need, if you're going to have, you want everything to load, even some off-screen stuff, then you want to limit that to a reasonable number of elements, screen elements. Otherwise, you'll be building thousands of elements off screen that no one's ever going to see, and it'd be very slow, because the thing is, it has to do a lot in one build of the UI. It has to build everything, and then obviously that would be slow. Yeah, and then people want to install your app because the performance is lousy. Flutter is very, very fast, but it doesn't make up for really, really bad code.
Yeah.
All scrollable items, including single child scroll view, work on the principle of slivers. It just so happens that single child scroll view has one sliver for everything that's inside it, right? So it can't build multiple items. It has to build everything. That's the key, right? Whereas list view, doesn't matter if it's builder or non, everything else, they build the individual elements, right? So, and reuse them if possible. Right. Oh, Roberto's another one. Stepper overflows. When I have it horizontal and does not scroll, then vertical works fine. How do I solve it? It's probably your constraints coming into Stepper that it doesn't. You've got an unconstrained bound on your horizontal. So if it's in a column, you want to make sure the column has a cross-axis alignment of stretch. That should probably solve that kind of thing. Again, it's that kind of idea of it can't scroll, it can't know what the bounds are if it's unconstrained. So the other thing you can do is wrap it in a layout builder and then print out the constraints coming down the tree. That's another little trick you can do. But yeah. All right. Has anyone else got anything to add to that? It also could just be that Stepper's widget doesn't support it. I don't remember. I know some of the very early widgets, even the what was the seek bar, whatever it is. No, it's not called seek. Is it not called seek bar? Is it? Oh, my brain. I've been doing too much. No, it's not seek bar. Come on, the scrub bar. What's the scrub bar called? Come on, what's the widget for scrub bar?
The scroll handle.
You talking about the thumb?
The thumb.
Yeah, the thumb on the bar. Yeah.
The slider. It's a thumb on a slider.
Slider. Slider's the widget. Yeah. So for example, I remember the very early days, slider widget had very similar problems where it wouldn't like resize properly in overflow because it was all custom drawn. It wasn't using sub widgets. It's obviously improved since then, and they've got a lot of things that there's what's the word? It's got a lot better inside Flutter, but yeah, I wonder if Stepper is one of those cases where it doesn't support that. So just let you know, like try it, but there's no guarantees. I don't remember. Damian, is it possible to pass a Flutter widget using method channels or something else and render it as native code, specifically on iOS? No, I'm afraid it's not. However, I don't know why you would want to render it in iOS. Are you trying to use Flutter to render out like a widget on the desktop, like the home screen widgets, things like that? What you want to do in those situations, and it's just a trick, and it's purely just a trick. In a lot of cases, when you want to use the result of Flutter in the native operating system, you either have to go down the route of a Flutter view or the native sort of platform view stuff, which is kind of really complicated. Or what you can do is use your Flutter code to render a widget into an image, and you send the image over your method channel and display the image, which is the trick. So it's the same as like, It's the same as what you see on the, believe it or not, right now, what you see us on the screen, this whole browser and everything is one big bitmap eventually, right? Eventually it's just an image. And it just so happens the image is refreshed at 60 times a second or something. So it feels very animated. But at the end of the day, your GPU and your computer just paints the screen every single time.
And at the end of the day, it's a bitmap, which I had a hard time getting used to for a while.
So at the end, so what I'm trying to say here is that what you see in your Flutter app, the end result is an image. So you can just take that, use it, what's called a repaint boundary, capture the image of all your widgets that as part of your subtree, and then you can send that image, the data for that image, over the method channel, and then on the platform side, take that data and you can load it as an image into like an image view or whatever, and that's a way. Then it would look like you have widgets on your native code. But obviously, if you interact, they're not going to animate or anything. You need to. It's just, again, it's a facade. It's a trick. But that might solve your problem. I don't know any more details about what you're trying to do. Again, it's not simple. This is not a beginner thing to do. I have a feeling that your question,
harder on iOS. And I just not to be joking, but it is something of a joke. Everything is always harder on iOS. That's one of the reasons that we have so many things for Android and not as many things for iOS is people try to make things for iOS and get frustrated.
I also have I actually am going to invite you. We'll see if we can get to it at the end to maybe repost your question a bit. Well, not necessarily this question, but why. I want to know why you want to do this, right? Because it feels to me that you're probably, what you're trying to do is you're reaching. This happens a lot for beginners. I mean, this is just an open-ended point I want to make to everyone here that's listening. This happens, and I remember this happened to me. It's the same thing about knowing what to pass. What to put to Google to find the answer, right? Now, you think the solution, you've got a solution in your head and you're searching for that specific solution, but it's the wrong solution you're looking for, right? So you need to kind of reverse what you're trying to do and say, how can I achieve this in different ways and search for those alternatives? Again, that kind of comes with experience, but my point here is that you can go down this route of looking online for answers to a question, but you're looking for the wrong answer. It's that kind of, what's the Matrix one? What's that thing in the Matrix? It's the answer that drives you, or whatever.
There is no spoon.
There is no spoon, kind of thing, right? It's you're asking the wrong question. That's why you're not finding what you want.
Yeah, I know the one you mean now. And
like,
of course, this is his use case.
Yeah, something like to build a custom notification and pass the widget. So, in that case, it is just an image, right? But however, what you can do is make the native code, build the widget that you want with the native widgets, right? And you just send over the text and the title, the content, whatever it is you're trying to send, the button like links, right? So what you're doing is you're providing the metadata, right? The information to fill out the native code for it to produce the native widgets. But yeah.
Okay. Best plugin for running a background task.
Well, I would say Work Manager, but was you the person that asked that question about Work Manager just mega not doing what you want? So, I mean, the problem here is that, as I said, that running stuff in the background is difficult, and there's a few different packages for it. I wouldn't say there's no best, right? Like, I've not. They've all got issues, to be honest. So yeah.
Okay. Wasm. We're all waiting for Wasm.
It's being worked on, and again, clarification: we do not work for Google. I have no idea when it's going to be released. We cannot answer that question, right?
They just
this is a community.
Kind of in all seriousness, if they're not overly busy, sometimes they're nice enough to answer our emails, but they are usually very, very busy, so we don't bug them. And every once in a while, they send us cool shirts.
I want to share something though around this. So Kevin Moore tagged me in a tweet.
Actually, we could try to get Miriam in here. Yeah, that would be. She hasn't been on the show in a while.
Here, I want to share this this tweet with everyone. Let me see if I can get this up. This button. There we go. So on native Dart platforms, one integer does not equal 1.0 double, right? But they're identical in JavaScript because JavaScript keeps an int as a double, right? It's only used as doubles. There's a quick, so we use this quirk to detect if it's running on web. And apparently they don't anymore because wasm has integers. So it breaks everything. So so he CC'd me in and we had like a little conversation. But yeah, I'll show you the code. The code now. So this used to be the trick here. I don't know if you can see that. How do you get rid of the? Oh, like that. As you can see here, used to be is 0 and 0 0 identical, then you're on web, right? It explains the bug here. But now they actually use a Dart define. So when they build for web, they define this extra package, and that means it gets shown. And then it looks like they've changed a few things to the different package. But yeah, and then you got K as web. I just thought I'd like to share that. So they're actively working on wasm, right? This has been actively worked on. They were held up for some time on the fact that the wasm GC standard had not landed and not been signed off on. I don't know if that has anymore. Go look it up. But if it has, then they'll be marching on forward and going somewhere very soon.
And another interesting point. Oh shoot! Stop driving my questions. Another interesting point from Damian. Using Pigeon. First of all, I thought Pigeon was a Linux thing, wasn't it? And also there are, I mean, come on, Damian, there have been so many faster ways to send messages. I mean, since like 150 years ago, they started with the telegraph.
Yeah. So Pigeon is the method channel code generator built by some people at Google. It's not officially supported. It builds a channel for like every function is a different channel. Personally, I feel like it's a bit of an overhead. I can't remember. That's when I last looked. It was a while ago. But to be honest, hand coding a method channel is super quick and simple. Most of your objects you send have got to from JSON. You just call it invoke method on either side, right? And then you say set method call handler on either side, and you're done. It's super simple. Just try it out. Play with method channels. Learn about it.
Okay. Any takes on using Melos for managing monorepos? You have no idea. We're having doubts, being skeptical about having a single GitHub CI YAML instead of multiples.
I mean, you can first of all, I've used Melos on a lot of projects and it works out wonderful. Yes. And second of all, you've got single CI YAML. I don't know about that, but you can force your actions and your other things to only occur on a subtree when a subtree is changed. So you can actually restrict your CI stuff so it doesn't get affected when certain things are pushed or different actions are performed when different parts of the repo is pushed. So yeah,
Melos has been very interesting. Especially when you set up the Melos script to run all of the different pub spec YAMLs in your project at the same time. That is so handy when you've got, I'm not kidding, 15 sub repos. Okay. So yeah, some of these apps can get very, very complicated and we break them up for specific reasons. You have one repo for all the things that are common to your various frameworks. You have one repo per framework. You have one repo for your database backend. You might have another repo for your auth, or you might put that into your backend. A lot of repos, and it works very well to keep things organized. But when you need to run all those pub spec YAMLs, Melos will keep you from wanting to shoot yourself.
The interesting thing is what you can do is, let's say you need to do you have some code and it depends on another package that's in a separate repo. You need to go to the other package, you need to check it out, you need to make those changes, you need to push it. Then you might have a updated then you need to update your pub spec to use that new version. Like, it gets really complicated and overly burdens the management. Having separate packages is a way of separating your code and makes it nicer. You don't need separate repos. Yeah, you know who this is, right? Who's asking this question?
Yeah, I'm sitting here looking at the picture and I'm going, wait a minute, reindeer pie.
Yeah. so Gianfranco.
Sorry, that's we all went out to lunch together in Oslo.
Yeah. Somnio software. Yeah.
Yep.
I didn't recognize you because your avatar's different from your Twitter. Yeah. Anyway, let's move on.
Moving on, buddy.
Very little time and more questions. Let's go.
Yes.
What is the best widget library plugin to play music? More specifically, MP3 files.
And a follow-up, preferably with good docs. Good follow-up. Smart.
Yeah.
I don't know if I could say that there's one specific one. Audio players, the audio players package is developed by it's audio players. It's developed by Bluefire. That's the people that do the open source game stuff in Flutter. That's really, really quite good. I think they use it for the audio stuff for their games. I don't know. I'm really the worst person to ask, because to be honest, this kind of thing I would normally write my own. So
now wait a minute. You did base some things off of audio players, though.
I have written my own as well. But yeah, there's nothing I can give out. I'm trying to think if there is a couple others. I said this to actually in my Flutter Vikings talk. I said that what Flutter is still missing. We have video underscore player as a package. Why is there no audio underscore player have a first party audio library? I know they have so much on their play and everything, but I feel like it being a UI framework, sound is part of UI.
Yes.
Right? There should be at least a first party basic sound setup, right?
Well, but the thing is that is such a huge thing to bite off, because remember the issues Linux had.
Oh yeah, but we also know that from the history of Flutter and the video player, it's been a huge thing. I'm not saying it wouldn't be small, but it's just
you know what
would be like to round off the implementation.
There are things the community needs to bite off as a community, and Flutter community plugins might be a good place for something like this.
Randall.
Yes,
I have had two different clients use Just Audio, and both were happy with it.
Oh, Just Audio, yeah, Just underscore Audio. Okay. I've used that package before as well. Yeah, I was trying to think of the others that I've used. I actually submitted some bug fixes to Just Audio a long time ago.
There you go. All right, keep moving. Let's go.
Tips on how to study new things in Flutter and how to memorize it. That's two different things. So let's answer the second one first. How to memorize it? Don't try. There's too much out there. You will hurt your brain. Keep the docs open in another window.
Mm-hmm.
As far as how to study new things, Alexander Lushenko and his wife.
The link is in the chat here. This is the highly suggested roadmap to Flutter development, which can sort of has topics and things you can be getting on with, and links and all this kind of fun stuff. There's also just what's Robbie's one? Do you remember Robbie's package?
Solid Awesome Flutter.
Yeah, Solid.
Not to be confused with. There's somebody else who was like trying to ride it. The name that he built on there. Solid Awesome or Flutter Awesome or something.
And this has just got like lots of packages.
Yeah, no, Solido is that's the copy. Or that's not a copy.
This is Robbie.
Oh, that is? Oh yeah, it is. Sorry.
He changed it. That is strange to the start because I think his sponsors are sponsoring it. But here you go. So there's articles, there's advanced tutorials, videos, all sorts of content all the way throughout that you will find that there's huge amounts of information on. So yeah, go for it. Right, moving on. Tips
moving forward.
Memorizing.
We have 4 questions.
Tips on memorizing. I think
8 minutes. Perfect case.
I want to say before we jump on the next one, tips on the next one. Tips on like sort of memorizing. I seem to have a good memory for these things, but I think it's just you train yourself. So I think it's just a case of reading those docs, keep reading those docs, and before you know it, you have this. You can get this kind of location. It's kind of almost like muscle memory. You kind of know where something is. It's like, oh, I put that thing down there, so you know where to go to get it, right? And it's that kind of thing. It's about knowing where to go to get the information. It's like, oh, that thing about alignment on column. Okay, I now know I need to go to the API column documentation and look that thing up, right? And then it gives you, so it's about having those reminders, but that's just about reading the docs. Honestly, just even if you don't understand the docs, let me be clear, go read the docs, because what happens is the more you read, it's kind of the Wikipedia effect. The more you read, you start linking things up in your head, and before you know it, you go, oh, that makes sense now because the other thing I just read and the other thing I just read and the other thing I read before that. So the more you read, the better.
And 3 quick points on that. The second time you read it, you're going to understand more than the first. The third time. So you might want to make a list of things like flex, flexible, all the standard stuff, and read the docs once a month on just the basics, like pick 10 things. Don't go crazy.
The thing to do, I think, is to what I've done in the past is you read something, and when you get a new topic, go put that in a list. Or you come up across something you don't know about, put that over to one side, and then you can come back to it, right? Like you can, if you don't want to look at it immediately and take you away from what you're reading right now and lose context, put it into this, then you go look at it afterwards. So you kind of like, it's what's it called? First in, last out, whatever it is. Yeah. Anyway.
Okay.
Right.
And then another thing too, when we're talking about speaking, it's the same thing. Know your subject, not your lines. Okay. Know the general concepts of what you're doing here. Don't try to memorize. Understand. It's more important to understand than memorize.
Most definitely.
So records. Is records an upcoming feature similar to data classes? I think I'm understanding that right. I have not dug into them, so sorry. Simon, you muted yourself.
Oops. No, records are not like data classes. There you go.
We have 6 minutes and 3.5 questions.
Data classes is more like the macro support that we count with. They generate all that. You give it the just the field names, and it will generate all the getters and the setters and the to from JSON, all that kind of fun stuff. Records is way more complicated than that, but you can think of them as they're similar. There you go.
We need to get Michael Thompson on here. He did say he'd be happy to come on the show.
Yeah.
Is there a way to check if the user has modified the system date time?
Randall? I answered this already in the chat. In the chat, I already answered this. The package is called NTP, and it will go out to the real internet servers, give you the actual time, and you can compare that to local time and see if somebody's been messing around.
You can also, so I will mention there is a couple of things here, right? So one, Randall, 100%, that's right. One is the question is a bit ambiguous here because has modified since when? Since they last opened the app, since they did this, just have modified since that expected.
Well, a use case I can think of on this one is if you're giving somebody 30 days to evaluate your app and they're trying to get around that.
And that's the use case I was going to say, because the answer is the first time they open the app up, you record the date time, save it to disk, and each time the app following starts up, you load the date time, you compare it to the current date time. If the difference is more than 30 days, you stop them from using the app. And you actually set a flag which says no longer use the app. So it doesn't matter if they change the date time, it will then break.
That's what they're doing. But instead of what we're saying here is instead of checking the date time the second time on the device, reach out with the package and make sure you get the real date time.
But the point here is but it doesn't matter if they change. The point is if you've recorded it and they can't get to the files to change those things, it doesn't matter if they change the local date time because they can't get around it, right? But what they say
what they're talking about is the function's going to compare what's stored with whatever they fetch. And if what they fetch has been doctored by the user, then that can fake your app out.
But there's plenty of reasons for it to be different from that. And you can't guarantee the time zone is set. It's not that simple. It's not that simple as doing it that way, right? Like, for example, let's say you go fetch it from NTP and they're in like 4-hour difference, or they go abroad and they change their clock by 6 hours and suddenly and nothing works, right? Like the point here is if you just think about the logic of what you're trying to do and reverse back from that, right? Like kind of work out how I might achieve the end goal, right?
And to prevent the time zone problem, key everything off of UTC.
Yeah, always do. Yeah, always like convert to UTC, and then you're comparing on the same. So it doesn't matter if the time zone changed on one of them in local; they're both going to be compared to the same. The other thing I mentioned here is, hang on, carry on with that one. The point I was going to mention here is there a way to check if the user modified the specific time? You can also on Android. I don't know about iOS, but you can read the system date time and see if it's set to auto. That means the system is automatically getting it from their like a cell tower and from everything like that. And if it's set to auto, then you know it's correct, right? Whereas if they manually went in there and changed the time, you can tell. So you can tell if it's set or automatic. But that's a platform specific thing that you're going to have to go look up on Android or iOS or Apple. Windows, whatever, you know.
Yeah, but, folks, to the ones who are still putting Q and stuff, there is this scrolling thing at the bottom.
They don't read that. I noticed.
All right.
Can we create a written in Dart and not platform specific player? I mean, you could, right? The difference here is you need to think about what goes into a video player. You need to decode the video files. So you need that's the container format. You then need to decode the information that's contained within that's compressed. That needs to go through a codec, right? And all of that can be done from Dart. But it's like, well, why am I doing that when there's already libraries that do all this hard work that are well tested and well used?
The only reason to do that is if you're trying to study how the process works and understand it. Other than that, you're taking a whole lot of time to do something that other people have already made easy for you.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, go on.
I got a Randall.
I just want to point out that Kyle just said, "I noticed the scrolling marquee just now." I told you, nobody reads that. Yes, because we had 6 questions since that's been up. Really.
Anyway,
doesn't matter.
So coming back, the point here is that there's well-tested code that everyone that everyone uses. So why not use it? The difference is how we achieve it. And again, you get better performance by using the native platform stuff because it's designed for video playback. They optimize it for that use case. So again, you know, you can do it, but why would you want to? Right? There's no purpose in doing it
unless you're studying the process.
Yeah. Go create yourself. What was it? What was that? Star Wars. Do you remember that, Randall? There's like an ANSI Star Wars in ANSI.
No, the video player, the QuickTime player as ASCII.
Yeah. There was a website. You can look this up. There's a website you can connect to, like SSH or something, and it literally has the entire Star Wars. I think 1, 2, and 3, the 4, 5, and 6, whatever.
It was just 4.
The original films,
the original one.
But it has it where the whole film is done in ASCII and comes across in your terminal. It's really crazy. But that's a good example there of if you go get this. I think it's open source. If you go get the code for that, you could then try and make a player for that in Flutter, right? You know, understand the problems involved in transporting data and decoding it and all the rest of it, right?
Yeah.
It's just not going to be as difficult as actual real video files there. Anyway.
Last question. Let's do it.
Actually, I don't know if we can change the location of the banner. We'll look into that in the settings for StreamYard later. Last question, we're 1 minute over. So yeah, it looks like this algorithm works really well for when we cut questions.
I'll remember it for the future.
Hurry up. What's the question?
When I try to create a new app by my idea and not following any course, I got confused. Don't know what to do. Okay, so when you try to create your own app and you're not following a tutorial or a school, you got confused and didn't know what to do first. Honestly, the first thing to do first is lay it out. I don't know if I would go as formal as a UML diagram, but
I was going to say, I still get this sometimes. I don't know if you would call it like, it's that thing of having too many options and not.
It's writer's block.
Try to do it all in your head.
It's writer's block. It's the programming equivalent of writer's block, where you're looking at the blank page and you don't know where to go next.
No, I was going to say
the easy way I can. I'm sorry. The easy way I can kickstart this is, what do I need? Okay, if I've got a video player, what's the first thing I'm going to need? Well, I'm going to need a video. So write the model for that, right? And I'm going to need a player. And then I'm going to need buttons, whatever. And hopefully you'll get on a roll.
Yeah.
Sorry, Simon.
Like I was going to say, like most things, like in life, make a checklist, right? Break it down. The more you break it down, then you can then tackle the small things. But when you're at this top level, you just see this big thing ahead of you. You're like, how do I tackle this? How do I even, dive in and start working on something? And the idea is you just have to like break it down. What's the first thing you want to do? What's the next thing you want to do? I want to make the user be able to log in. I want to do this. I want to do that. Start making tickets. Use GitHub. Make yourself issue tickets. Write things out. When you think of them, write them out in detail as you can, and then you can come back to them later, right? Like there's also, like, as Randall said, there's writer's block, which is almost like, how do I choose? What do I do next? And it's very much like that. However, there's also there's another thing that comes with Flutter and Dart, and that is more of a I don't know what's there's a name for it. Like when there's too many options, like there's too many choices. So you don't know what to choose. What's that? What's that called? There's
it's called too many choices.
Anyway, there's a name for that.
Good piece of advice here. Thank you, Matthew. Good one.
Yes.
Don't get married to your first idea.
Yeah.
Or your second or your third. And also, we've got a smart ass because
analysis.
And that's it. That's the one. Analysis, paralysis, analysis. Analysis, paralysis. Yeah.
Thank you, Matthew.
And we've got a smart ass because somebody acknowledged that there is a scrolling marquee, and then they asked another question.
Yeah.
Smart ass.
They did.
Keep it for next week. Yeah.
Yep.
But yeah. Just back to this point. Refactor. The answer to also just to good code. Always refactor. Always delete. Nothing is ever finished. Very rarely do you ever get any code that's ever finished completely. Like you're always going to refactor. When you come back to it later on, you go, "Oh, I could have done it this way. And that's slightly neater, and you can do it this way." It's always opinion.
A great thing for that, and it's a shame most people don't have this chance. But if you're able to get your code reviewed by someone like Simon or Remy, when you come out of it, the only thing that you still have is your imports. Because they've torn, in the name of your class, they've torn everything else completely apart and shown you a completely different way to approach the entire thing. But obviously, Simon and Remy have jobs.
But I think what you just said there is an explanation of what happens is because of our experience, we can come at a problem and know a more efficient, maybe a better way of producing, a less complicated way. So that's what we're offering, right? And I think that the problem here is that's what's going to happen. You do it once, and it's like you don't even sure how you're going to build the code. You kind of throw it all together. This is how a lot of code is built, right? Throw it all together, you get it working. And you look at it and go, okay, now I can smooth it out, structure it, and change this and change it. And you refactor, and you get rid of all the loose ends. You tidy up. You tidy up the error handle. You tidy up this. You tidy up that. And then you've got a good all-rounded piece of code. But again, it's like it takes time.
A good one. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Randall.
I'll just say, just to continue a little bit the conversation about how to become a better programmer. Programming is half art and half science. You learn the science by reading the documentation, reading the specs, looking up things you don't understand when you're looking at somebody else's code. But you learn the art by looking at what other people have done. You start to get the rhythms, you start to get the patterns, you start to get the way things fit together. And then when you don't understand something there, you go back to the documentation. But it's part art and part science. You have to do both to get good.
And what's best is, in our case, in Flutter, can often be subjective. Now, if you're trying to build a game, what's going to be best is whatever gets you the best performance. It's very objective. In our case, it can be subjective. And another thing, like Simon was saying, simplifying things for a beginner. If you're a beginner, listen up. If you are trying to figure out if something is even and odd, and you're dividing it by 2 and then trying to see if the remainder is not 0, you're doing it the complicated way. Somebody else would show you how to do a modulus equals 0, a mod 2. Okay. And if that doesn't, if you're not familiar with that, you'd look at this written out in the modulus operator and you think, it's so complicated, I don't understand what it is. That's 2 things: whether or not it's complicated and whether or not you understand it. Because when you understand it, it's no longer complicated.
Yeah. And that's when you should document it.
Yeah.
We're gonna hit, but Christian's a long time supporter. He said, perfection is when you can't take anything away. And the thing is, I had this same perspective, and yes, you're right, it's your perfection at that point in time. But what happens is your knowledge changes and your approach will change in the future. And when you come back, you realize it's not perfect anymore, right? It was perfect when you made it, but it's not perfect anymore. And
the thing is, maybe you find a way that has better performance with more code.
Yeah, there's all sorts. So that's another thing, like loop unrolling is a good example of that. Anyway, we won't go there. If we didn't get to your questions, sorry, I see there's some really good questions. I do want to cover this one quickly and say that Tim Sneath posted in the Reddit conversations around this. Go look it up, Tim Sneath Reddit. They're not going to be dropping it. It's not even a problem. Don't even worry about Flutter. It's staying around.
Google has so much of their internal stuff built with Flutter, they would be shooting themselves in the foot. And even if they do try to shoot themselves in the foot, what you may not understand is a lot of people are able to push to the repo.
There's so much of what you've just said that's already covered in these great write-ups. They're out there. Hixie, Tim Sneath have both done some really great writes about this topic. There's no need for us to discuss it, really, honestly. We've been saying this since 2018 when we did the DroidCon
2019. Flutter gained enough speed in 2019 that even if Google walked away from it, there are so many people who have, you don't realize, Googlers are not the only ones who have permission to push to that repo. Okay, highly trusted people who have been around for 4 to 5 years do have permission to push to the repo, but I think the agreement is that, well, basically right now you put it in front of Hixie. But
there's process. Anyway,
in the threads, in the responses to Tim Sneath's thing, in one of my Reddit posts, somebody added a comment that I hadn't seen before and hadn't thought about. Flutter sells Firebase. Firebase makes money.
Yeah, Flutter may be a money sink, but Firebase is making money, and Flutter and Firebase have become so integral to each other. Google is hiring developer relations people who are straddling the Flutter and the Firebase team, and they're doing talks on how to use the two together. Yeah, they're hiring people to do this. That's how integrated they're becoming.
Yeah. Okay. It's huge.
All right.
10 after. So we didn't go too far over, and I've got a meeting to get to. So I will catch everyone next week. Make sure feel free to use our hashtag Humpday Q&A in Twitter and see what we can get to. If your question did not get answered this week, post it next week. Come in here early. Get your question in, and we'll get
167 hours from now. Yes.
Next week, the dog will be subbing in for me. I think she can answer a few more technical questions than I can.
Nice.
But yeah, look for the pooch.
All right. We'll see you then. Bye.
Bye.